Okay.
All right. And Dr. Albert Tompkins, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, great. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Thank you so much, Mr. Alonso. I appreciate that wonderful introduction. And I greet everyone today. How's everyone doing today? Doing okay on this wonderful Saturday? And I'm so thankful to be a part of this wonderful conference put on by Man and Me. I want to thank the organization for allowing me to be a part of this. I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to get together just to see how we're going to, as they say, weather the storm, which is the theme for this summit. And I'm excited about being here to be a part of it. And so, again, I'm Dr. Thompkins. I'm in the British Virgin Islands. And funny enough, we're actually under a tropical storm warning because a storm is coming our way, but we're going to be okay. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. So it's kind of a coincidence that we're talking about weathering the storm today. So yes, today we're going to be discussing peace building and conflict resolution, and what does that mean, and where do you go from here? Because I truly believe that we're in a state of almost constant conflict. And so we're going to talk about that today and find out some tips on how to get to a place of peace. Because it's one thing to have a resolution of the conflict, but how do we get a state of peace? And I think that's, to me, the main issue. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and begin with my presentation here. Just one moment. I get it up here. Okay. Ready? Okay. Let me get to the beginning here. Sorry about that. Okay. Everyone can see that there. Awesome. So yes, this is the peace building and conflict resolution session. And for our objective for today, we're going to actually begin by defining what we mean by conflict. Because a lot of connotation regarding conflict, something is just negative, but as we'll find out, it actually can be a positive thing depending on your perspective. So we'll talk about the definition, we'll talk about the different myths and facts about conflict. We'll also look at tips on how to have a reasonable conflict resolution. And to me, what I call the heart of conflict resolution, how do we get to that place? And I believe that will be a springboard to get us to a place of peace. And then we'll talk about peace building. So let's begin. I want to begin with a story. And I don't know how many of you all remember the story by Dr. Seuss called The Zack, a very unique story. And the story goes that there was a character, two characters, and they were called Zacks. And one was going towards the north, and another one was going towards the south. And they end up meeting in the same place. And they kind of stood there, and no one wanted to budge. No one moved out the way. So they stood there and folded their arms. And one said, I don't believe in moving because that's not how I was raised. And the other one said, well, I don't believe in moving out the way either because, again, that's how I was raised. So they stood there looking at one another, staring at each other, and no one wanted to budge. Now, society around them began to build around them. They built highways and pathways and things were going on, but they were stuck right there. And the end of the story says that civilization moved on, but those two men stood there for the rest of their lives. And I believe that's where many of us are at. We're stuck. We're stuck somewhere in a conflict. It may have happened in our past. It may have happened currently, or some of us may be anxious about a conflict that may be impending. But the question is, where do we go from here? When faced with someone that doesn't want to get out of the way or a situation that doesn't want to move, how do we overcome the conflict? And so that's why we're here today. So let's define what conflict actually means. Let me ask you a question. What comes to mind when you hear the word conflict? What connotation comes up? What thought comes to you? how do you begin to say, okay, what does this actually mean to me? Because there are many different types of conflicts. There's, personal conflicts, there's marital conflicts, there's conflicts within the job, there are conflicts in business, there are conflicts between organizations, there are conflicts between countries and different nations. And even in this COVID-19 era, there's a conflict between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, right? And so what does it really mean? Well, if you look at the root word, it comes from a Latin word, it means collision. And if you notice the icon next to there, you'll see two guys pointing in the same direction, almost about to collide, just like the Zacks. Can you relate to that? Have you ever been somewhere where you want to go one way, and yet maybe your partner or your friend wants to go into another direction? That, my friend, is a conflict. It also means to strike together, almost symbolic of like when you strike your hands together. They say it takes two hands to clap, right? And so conflict means a coming together. Now notice, it comes together, but there's nothing being accomplished. Have you ever been to a meeting where you're coming together, but yet there is some type of indecision that's not being shared? I know I have. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you're making progress, but in reality, you're stuck? That's a conflict. There's something that's going against where you're trying to go. So we must pause and ask ourselves the question, where are we trying to go? We're in August. 2021 is a few months and it will be done. It'll be 2022. Can you believe it? Are you making progress? Or is there a conflict taking place that's hindering your progress? What's stopping you? Is it your mentality? Is it a person? Or maybe you're part of an organization that's stuck, that doesn't want to move. Things are coming up against it. How do we get around it? I'm glad you asked. We want to talk about that today. And I want you to think about that because even personally, think about collision. My wife and I, my family went through a major hurricane back in 2017. And this hurricane came and collided into our island. There was so much devastation. The Caribbean is, sunny 24/7, 365 days a year. But when we went outside after the storm, it looked like winter. All the leaves were gone and we had a conflict. How were we going to move forward? And so I asked myself, I had to look internally, what do I really want to do? Do I want to move? Do I want to stay? Do I want to help build? Because that's where we are, I believe now in 2021. So let's look at some of the myths versus the reality of conflict. Because again, there are many things out there that say, let's try not to have a conflict, as opposed to really facing it and maybe growing. Because you really can't have growth unless there's something going against you. Because at that point you decide you can either freeze, flight, or fight. Those are our main opportunities. Those are the three categories that we usually think about. When we think about fighting, we always think about the negative. But I'm going to show you today how to fight the good fight of faith within a conflict. So let's begin. As you see here, this comes from Thomas and Kilman in 1977, their theory of conflict. And within this particular diagram, you'll see many different categories and opportunities that you could have during a conflict. So on the one scale, you'll see assertiveness. You'll see how you can be unassertive at the bottom and more assertive at the top. So let's begin with the one on top. On top, you have competition. Now, the myth is that competition is great, and it is. I have nothing against competition. But what happens when all you do is be assertive, is always competing, you run the risk of actually losing the relationship. You may win the battle, but you may lose the war because all you want is concerned about your needs. It's all about you. You're not considering the other person at all. You want to have your way. It's all about you. Your focus is just you, and there's no consideration about the resources that are available, because the reality is that the true definition of economics is that it is the allocation of scarce resources, meaning that all resources are limited. So for you yourself to have everything and not consider the resources is very selfish. But again, we live in a society where it's all about me. We live in an iPhone, I this, I that, ITV. It's all about me. But again, you lose the risk of actually having a relationship. So that's the one aspect called competing. Now, if you go down where you're not as assertive, you have avoiding. How many can relate to that? You avoid the conflict. You just want to be, it's like, I don't want to do anything. I want to get out of the situation. You're both unassertive and you're uncooperative. So you can be competing, which is very assertive, or very assertive and no cooperation, or you can be unassertive and no cooperation. Therefore, you're avoiding. And that's very unhealthy, because then you're not facing what's happening in your life. You're not facing what's going on with you. You're just trying to avoid situations. And many men were like that. Our wives want to talk, but we don't want to avoid the conversation because why? It's comfortable. We want to face the reality. But we have to learn and grow and how to resolve the conflict. Now, the opposite of avoiding or competing is actually all the way down at the other end, is always cooperating and not speaking up for yourself. That's accommodating. And accommodating can be good, but then again, you lose. You don't get anything out of it. It's all about helping the other person. So you release all of your opportunity for you to grow because you just want to accommodate. You just want to be a yes, man. Yes, yes, we're going to do it. And how many coworkers have you seen are like that? They say yes to the boss about everything. They say yes to their partner, to their spouse, and not really taking account what's important to you, because you are important as well. By trade, I am a counselor, and I see many different persons. And I always tell my clients, you are important to you. So yes, you should speak up for yourself. You should learn how to be assertive to a degree, right? To make sure that your needs are met. And how many women out there are in relationships, are married, and they're just saying, yes, honey, I'll do this, I'll do that for the sake of the kids, and they don't grow. And then you turn around after 30 years, and you say, what about me? I've given so much, now I have nothing to come out of it. So that's not healthy as well. So what is the good mixture here? You don't be too competing, you don't want to avoid situation, but yet you don't want to be too accommodating. Well, Thomas and Kilman say the next step would be, okay, compromising. You're somewhat assertive and you're somewhat cooperating. It's kind of a give and take. It's kind of like you're going to cut your losses. Okay, I can get this in exchange for that. It's about really having an opportunity to say, you know what? I see you understand it. You have that need, and I have that need. How can we really compromise here? Now, many think compromise is a weakness, but in reality, compromise is a strength. And if you want to have good relationships, compromising is going to be key, because it's a give and take. And so I ask you, what is hindering you from actually compromising to get also what you want, but also assisting the other person? I believe Steve Covey calls it a win-win situation, because we all win at that level. Now, you might not win everything, and that's some people's problems. You have to realize there's some things you're just not going to have, and you have to be okay with that. But the reality is, you have to realize what is important to you as an individual. So ask yourself the question, what's important to me? What are the things I truly, really desire and truly need? That's where compromise comes in. You put your chips on the table and you say, let's make a deal. How can we make amends here? How can we really be able to come to an agreement about this? And then the next level really is collaboration. Now, collaboration takes it to a level where you're very assertive and you're very cooperative. And that really happens because you get almost everything you want and they get almost everything they want. And that's a whole nother level. That comes to actually the heart of conflict resolution. And we'll talk about that a little later on. But collaboration and compromise are the best tools and the best areas to be in terms of conflict resolution. And so you have to ask yourself the question, where am I at and where do I want to be? And what is it going to take to get me there? Maybe you lead an organization and you're trying to move it to a next level, a next dimension, and you have to realize where we are in terms of leadership, because everything rises and falls on leadership. So that's where you are in terms of the myths and reality. It's okay to be assertive. It's okay to have competition, but to what degree? If you're too competitive, you lose relationship. If you're too accommodating, you lose yourself. Where is the happy medium? And that's when you have to look within to find out where you are. So those are some of the myths and realities of conflict resolution. And that's just a summarization there to remind us. Competing, accommodating, avoiding, collaborating, and compromising. Where are you at? Okay? So let's begin looking at some tips, because I want to leave you today with some tools that you can utilize to help you as you go through your conflict resolution. As you go through your life and you do an assessment, you say, okay, these are the areas that I'm doing really well in, and yet these are the areas that I'm kind of struggling in. And it's okay. It's okay to be real, to find out, I'm here. This is where I'm at. And you have to be real with yourself. You have to realize where you are and then move on from there. You can't avoid everything for the rest of your life, because it's going to happen. It's going to take place. Things are going to move. You want to be like the Zacks, and you're sitting there staring at each other, staring at the situation, and not making progress, not making moves to go forward. So the first step, I'm going to look at more of a macro perspective, a more of a big picture perspective, to find out the best way to move forward. Because we may have some people who are part of organizations and they want to know, okay, how do I move my organization forward? How do I get around these areas where there's a clashing, where there's a collision, where there's areas where it's not really flowing? So the first tip, from a macro perspective, I truly believe in consensus building through community participatory research. What does that mean? It means taking a bottom-up approach, starting at the base level, which is I really appreciate Man and Me, because that's what they do. They go through the community and find out what the needs are and build a consensus from the base. Because many times, many organizations are really top-heavy. They go top-down and push down their agenda. But the reality is, if you push someone in the corner, they're going to reject it. So my suggestion is to go for more of a consensus building perspective from the bottom up to get information. Let me give you an example. When I was getting my PhD at the University of Texas, around 2008, there was a really devastating hurricane called Katrina that came through. And it really devastated the area down there in New Orleans area. And so we had an opportunity to do some research after the storm. It was a federally funded research opportunity. Me, under the guide of my mentor then, Dr. King Davis, we went down there and we decided to do some research to find out what is the best way forward. Now, there were some historical issues there for a while between the community and some leadership on a city level. But we were trying to find the best way forward. So the project was called the Clean Slate Project, because unfortunately, the hurricane swiped out many different neighborhoods, many different areas, many different resources for the community. But we went to them and we had meetings with leaders there. We had meetings with the community to find out what is the need? What is the best way to build your community now? Instead of us saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, we tried to find out what's best for you. How can we help you? And you'll be surprised at the response that we were given. Many persons love the fact that they had a say, that they had something to say about their own community. They felt empowered. They felt like they were a part of the solution. And we were able to build the consensus. We built our report, we submitted to the federal government, And I believe they use those suggestions on how to rebuild certain communities. And so the conflict was very minimal because we asked them, what do you desire? So I challenge many organizations. I say, listen, go to the community, go to where you want to build and find out how can we help? And you'll be surprised how there's to be a limited conflict by just building a consensus to find out what the needs are. So that to me is the first beginning. That's how we begin. That's how we set the stage. Because how you begin a thing will determine how it ends. And so just coming from a community participatory perspective really can help resolve the clashing of belief systems, the clashing of cultures, the clashing of language barriers, just by simply asking the question, how can we help? That could even be help in your relationships. Asking your wife or your spouse or your partner, how can I help you? What can we do to build this? Instead of suggesting, okay, this is what I want to do, what do you think? How can we build together? Because we can do more together than we can do apart. So I really believe in actually allowing the organic from the bottom up approach. I think that's the best key. So that's the first tip. The second tip, in terms of a macro perspective, will be a capacity building through education and empowerment. So what does that mean? It means providing the tools that are needed to empower the people to go forward. So again, if you go and you do a survey and you ask them what do they need, they tell you, listen, we want to address homelessness, we want to address substance abuse, we want to address domestic violence, but you don't give them the tools to do it, then that can resolve another issue. But why not provide the tools to do it, provide the education and empower them, and strengthen them in that area so that they can now go and fish. You teach them how to fish instead of giving them fish. Again, this is what I really appreciate about the Man in Me. That's what they do. They go in and provide skill sets to fathers to become true dads and understand how to be a man, and gives them the tools to go forward. Now they can teach someone else. And now you're beginning the process of moving forward. And so I really believe that building the capacity is key to help resolving conflict. Because once you build the capacity, they will not go back. You heighten their awareness. You stir some things up in them. They say, you know what? I can do this on my own now. I'm not dependent on this, that, and the third. Now I can go for it and empower other people. And it's almost like a domino effect because now they can teach their children and it goes on from there. Again, resolving old age issues and conflicts that were going against the grain during that time. So again, building capacity through education and power, I believe is important and is key to resolving age-old issues and happening, especially African-American communities. We see things happening, we see certain areas that are not growing, we hit a certain plateau, but that's because sometimes there's a lack of information. And information a lot of times is key. And I'm, again, a believer of information. In fact, part of my dissertation was about the theory of asymmetric information. What that means is a lot of times there's information that people don't know, and they use that to that advantage. And you see that a lot of times in the Black community. Because you don't know what you don't know. But once you're empowered with information, they're almost unstoppable at that point. So if you really truly want to resolve issues and resolve old age conflicts, I challenge you to empower the people, empower the communities, empower the organization, empower those who work for you. Allow them to grow in your organization. And you'll be surprised how committed they'll be to ensuring the success, to further their success, not only themselves, but also the organization. Now, my next tip, I want to look at the micro perspective on the individual level. We talked about organizations, we talked about communities. What about you as an individual? Are you suffering from some type of internal conflict? Because it's one thing to have conflict on the outside, but many of us are struggling with conflict on the inside. And as a counselor, I see that many times. A lot of times we're struggling with age-old issues. We're struggling with things that happened in our past. And it's hard for us to let it go. I can even personally, even myself, I may have a PhD now, but I can tell you something was said to me in the third grade by my teacher that impacted me even as I was going through my PhD program. I was in third grade. I grew up on Long Island, New York, and I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Height, and she was this tall. She was very short. And she said to me one day, she said, Albert, you know what? You don't need to go to college. People like you don't need to go to college. And as a child, I didn't know better. I said, okay. But you know, I happened to tell my mother that. Now, my mother was a Caribbean. And when she heard of that, oh boy, her dialect came back, her accent came back, and she was so perturbed that she went to the school, had a meeting with the teacher and the principal, and let them know that that was not the best thing to say to young Albert. But it impacted me because I remember as I was doing my dissertation, I said, wow, it was kind of tough. Maybe this is not for me. But I had to bring myself and say, you know what? All right, I can do this. My parents supported me, my wife supported me, but I got over it. So the internal struggles that we have, the conflict that we have, the things that are in our minds that our parents say, that our relatives say, that we share with ourselves can be impactful. How do we resolve that? The best way to resolve it, honestly, is actually to face it. Face it head on and begin to have what I call self-love. And love those things about you that make you unique, that make you different, that make you strong. Now, we all have our weaknesses, but we also have our strengths. And as a counselor, I typically counsel from what's called a strengths perspective. I meet people where their strength is at and go from there, because if you can strengthen that area that you think is strong, you'll be able to uplift other areas, because now you're confident. Now your self-esteem is getting stronger. Now you begin to believe in yourself, but you first have to face it. Yes, you may not be perfect, but you're still alive and you can go on to perfection. You begin to be mature. You can begin to move on from where you are, but you first have to face it. So I pause for a minute here to ask you the question, what are you struggling with? What are you conflicted with? What are you facing today that you need to desperately face, but you're avoiding it? You're not being assertive. You're not being cooperative with the process, but you're simply avoiding it. Or maybe you faced it and you fell down a little bit. I want to encourage you to get back up again. Do it again. Fight another day. Get back in there. You can definitely make it, because I know I've made it. And having love for who you are, who God has created you to be, is the beginning to overcoming the internal conflict. So many times we don't have the peace within, therefore we can't have peace without. And it's important for us to first get that peace within and find out, okay, I'm struggling, but I can make it. I can do it better. And how do we do that? Well, first of all, you may have to get some outside help, and that's okay. Find someone, find a mentor, find a coach, find someone that's willing to pour into you to strengthen that area and allow yourself to get stronger. Secondly, we're in the information age. You literally have information at the tip of your fingers. Google it. Find different tools, different assessments, different things to strengthen those areas that you're struggling in. Let me give you an example. I myself, I live in the Caribbean, so part of my car wasn't working at one time, so I had to order a part. I ordered a part, but then I looked on YouTube to find out how to fix it, and I fixed it. Now, I'm not the greatest mechanic in the world, but because the information was there, I strengthened that area. I looked at myself, I said, okay, how do I move forward? And I fixed it myself. So having a love for self is very important in terms of having peace within so that you can resolve the issues. And so I always challenge my clients to look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, do you love you? When's the last time you told yourself, you know what? I love you, Albert, or I love you, Alonzo. I love myself. Look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you. Yeah, I have struggled, but I still love you. I'm still important because I'm still around. I'm still alive. I'm still making it. And so face the conflict and allow the love that's within you to ooze out. And therefore, you can have peace on the outside. A lot of times it begins within so that you can work its way out. Okay? So that's my tip in terms of the micro perspective. Which leads to actually the heart, what I call the heart of conflict resolution. At the very heart of it, what is the main thing that allows us to resolve those issues that are always ongoing? Well, from my understanding, my research, my counseling, at the heart of conflict resolution is understanding. If you notice the picture there, what's in one person's mind is also in the other person's mind. And what really is understanding? Understanding is really recognizing the place that someone is at, mentally, emotionally, physically, psychologically, where they are, and have an understanding where they're at. If we can just understand one another, many things will be resolved. Many things will be smoothed out much easier if we can just realize what they're saying and they can realize what I'm saying. So I believe Steve Covey says, first seek understand before you're understood. So in other words, ask the question, tell me your perspective. What makes you think that way? Why are you looking at it from this perspective? And get their origin, find out where they're coming from, and I can almost guarantee the conflict will dissolve. Now, you may not always agree, but at least you're coming from the standpoint of understanding. And I think that is the key. Because what people say, you don't understand what I'm saying. You don't understand where I'm coming from. But imagine taking the time out to understand. So that's the thing about collaboration. It takes time. It takes time to get understanding. But time is a precious commodity. If you invest the time, you'll be amazed what can be unearthed. Now, time is funny because you can't manage it. You really can't really manage time. You have to manage yourself. And so if you can manage yourself as time is ticking, you'll be able to be successful. So for instance, my son has graduated from college. Now he's now in university in the States, in America. And the one thing I really wish I could have with more of his time, but the time is gone. So you have to embrace the time that you're at and invest it to understanding in relationships and organizations so that there can be a resolution. And so understanding, I believe, is at the heart of it, which leads to peace building, because there's nothing like coming from a place of understanding when you're in a relationship. Just to know that someone understands you gives you some incredible peace, because now you feel like, okay, they can relate to me. We're not as foreign as we thought we were. In fact, we're closer than we originally thought. I always tell people we have more in common than we have differences. And so I believe peace begins with having understanding of where we are. Understanding your faults individually, understanding your strengths, understanding how you can help other people gives you so much peace. And if you can understand one's culture, someone else's language, and just realizing where they're coming from, I believe we can become a place of peace and begin the building blocks of having peace. And peace is not necessarily not having any conflict. Peace is having a calm inside, realizing that it's going to be okay. It may not be okay today, but I know it's going to be okay because I have this peace on the inside, realizing my purpose and my destiny is going to be fulfilled. And so peace building, where do we go from here? Peace to me is an action. It's something that we have to do. And so in the words of Benjamin Franklin, well done is better than well said. I believe we have to begin to take an active action in terms of understanding to get peace. Many times people say, I can't get along with so-and-so, but what are we doing about it? It's one thing to say we want peace and to have an understanding and to resolve conflict, but it's another thing to be actively involved and engaging and investing in time to understand their perspective, to understand their point of view, so that we can get to a place of peace. Because if we don't, we'll be like the Zacks, stuck, facing one another, and yet another year goes by. Another cycle goes by, and we're not doing anything about it. So as I conclude today, my call to action to everyone that's listening is, let's make an intentional effort to have peace and have conflict resolution by understanding. Take on the weapon of understanding in terms of your conflict resolution. I challenge you, invest the time, take a time out and invest in understanding yourself and understanding the one you're in conflict with, understanding your environment, understanding your neighborhood, understanding the situation that you're in, the community that you abide in. Because at that point, then we can build and get an understanding. So peace building and conflict resolution in action, we can do it. It's time out for us making excuses and saying, you know what, I didn't understand me, I'm going to give up. I challenge you to invest in yourself and invest in others to engage in understanding so that we can have true peace, not a false peace where we're saying everything is good and really it's not. There's a thin veneer of quote unquote peace, but underneath there's so much turmoil. I believe we're in an age that we must face the reality of where we are and begin to build peace by getting understanding. I think that's my time. That's all I have at this point. Are there any questions? I'd be happy to take any questions. I'd be happy to engage to find out what we can do at this point, but that's my time. Thank you so much, Mr. Alonso, man and me. I appreciate this opportunity. Are there any questions at this time?
All right, I would like to say, while you guys are thinking about the questions you would like to ask, Dr. Thompkins, thank you so much for sharing. That was such powerful information. I was taking notes here. And so, tips for conflict resolution. You mentioned the community participatory research, really leading with that question, how can we help? And that's a very powerful question in terms of, taking the right step forward, finding out what those needs are. Also, education and empowerment. We do have a lot of a lack of information on many things, but that's very powerful. You mentioned like facing the conflict within, self-love, the weapon of understanding. I never heard that before, but that's really, really awesome. At the heart of conflict resolution is understanding. So very rich, very rich information. Thank you very much. I would like to let participants know that in the chat, there is a survey for you to fill out. So definitely fill out the survey. It helps us to be able to assess kind of the sessions, how we can help you and how we can provide and support you as well. So the survey just takes about maybe 3 to 5 minutes to fill out, but if you can click on that link, definitely fill out the survey. This is this session, Peace Building, with Dr. Albert Thompkins. But I'm gonna go ahead and see if there's any questions.
Okay.
There's a comment in the chat. Thank you very much.
Awesome. You're welcome. Thank you very much for being part of it. Appreciate it.
All right. So this time I'll go ahead and